It's just a fundamental human trait. We overvalue what we know, and we undervalue what we don't. Right? Now, what I would say is that to some extent, this sort of global system, sort of that was put together, there were lots of people that said, whether they were right or wrong, that there were risks. Whether this was a black swan event or not, I would say in large part it wasn't a black swan event. The level of global risk that was there, which direction, how systemically it could fall apart, maybe it was. But I would sort of say to you that we're now in a world that is so dramatically interconnected, right? That, there was for a while when this first started to happen in August of 2000, when big action started to happen in the spring of 2007, if you read business pages, they talked about decoupling, the theory of decoupling, right? Decoupling was the idea that you could have significant amount of financial problems in one sector of the global economy, and it wouldn't affect. We were now at a place where it wouldn't affect the other sectors of the economy. Well, you don't hear decoupling anymore, right? It's a global. It's sort of a global problem in an unprecedented way, and it takes global infrastructure, and it will likely take not only local and national, but global regulatory capacity or supervisory capacity to even have the information to understand the nature of systemic risk. So we will fundamentally change, we will fundamentally transform sometime in the next several years the infrastructure. We know, for example, that we fundamentally, have changed the way the banking and financial services industry looks like just from the names of the institutions, right? Look, the last time I looked, and it was a while ago, there's about $85 trillion worth of bank assets, $9 trillion worth of bank assets. About 8,500 banks in America, down from about 15,000 during the S&L crisis, right, about 20 years ago. Of those 8,500 banks, 4 of them now control 60% of all bank assets. Most banks are these little, I sit on the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia, local Fed, and a lot of them are represented by people who run little banks, right? And their view is, well, we don't have anything to do with this. Why are we getting caught in this? We're just trying to mail loans in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they don't have it. This wasn't their world, right? It was a world that had to do with money center banks, it had to do with investment banks, it had to do with hedge funds, it had to do with a fundamentally different part of the economy, a more dynamic part of the economy, but a part of the economy that appears to have had, because it was so unregulated, because our information was so problematic, appears to have had a more systemic risk than we could imagine. So we will have a clearinghouse for this information in ways that we never thought. We will, at the end of the day, have to figure out how to keep people in houses. Look, the housing market, no matter what happened in the Dow, is about even today. No matter what happens in the Dow, the housing market still has not finished coming down. This is regionally specific, right? Some regions are fine, they never went up. The good news and bad news about Philadelphia is it grows kind of like a treasury bond, right? It doesn't have like boom and then boom, right? It's just like doop, 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 and sort of like that, right? So we don't have these big, in most places, we don't have these big crashes, right? The big crashes are in like Las Vegas, right? Or the whole parts of the South, parts of the Southwest, or parts of the Midwest that have just, they never went up, but they're going down pretty fundamentally. Okay, so you've got, so in many places, it hasn't come down as the amount that it has to come down, right? In the real world, when there was a relationship between income and housing value, or a relationship between income and what you could afford on a mortgage, in the real world, it was about $3.50 of housing value for every dollar of income. Once we transformed that world, and people had much too much value for what they could afford, their debt was too great, now it's going to come back down. The availability of capital, the availability of debt, the availability of easy access helped drive up values. Also created access. Sometimes that was good, sometimes that was problematic, but it did that. Okay, so we're now at a point of coordinated global action. We don't know what direction that will go, but we've got a couple huge issues, obviously, besides how long it takes to cut out of the liquidity problem and the solvency problem. One is what is the extent of a national recession? What will we be? Will it be deep, right? Recession just technically means, negative growth. What will it be? If you looked at America by regional economies, I don't know, Mark Zandi told me 55, 60% of the country's in a recession, has been in a recession for a long time. But if you looked at it in the aggregate, nationally, the question is, are we in a recession? I don't know. You know, it depends. I haven't seen, not in the last quarter, but in the quarter coming up, maybe. My gut says, again, just this is Jeremy Nowak, my gut says 2009 will be recessionary, and the question is, recessionary, how deep and how long, right? And I think that's going to be driven by lots of different kinds of factors. You know, you could already see what was starting to happen with the credit slowdown. I mean, you know, when Main Street gets hurt, somebody can't get a line of credit. All of a sudden, the home equity loan gets cut off. You know, all of a sudden, you get all these things, and people have laid people off, and you begin to get this sort of big problem. All right. So we've got a set of questions. It seems to me, and by the way, I'm delighted to be here because I think. You know, I was here not to do this, but I was here to do a session because I care so much about the arts and its role in not only the rebuilding of cities and other places, but its role in our sort of public life and its role in economic life to some extent. Although, as I always warn, I would never make that the thing that I hang my hat on because it's far more meaningful than that. So the question becomes, it seems to me, you could look at this from a variety of different perspectives, and I'm sure you all have looked at this from a variety of different perspectives. Let me throw out a few, and then we can I'll stop and we can talk. So the first thing that's happening in a lot of places is we've got the problem or the question of a whole new set of relationships. I mean, think of your peers, think of the people that you work with. Anybody here from Charlotte, North Carolina? Anybody from Charlotte? So, hey, Charlotte. So if you're here from Charlotte, the Wachovia Foundation just is in a different situation now, right? So all of a sudden, welcome to Wells Fargo, right? Do you know anybody in Wells Fargo? I don't know. You know, it'll take. We all know the transaction cost of a new set of relationships, a new set of institutions, people sort of having their feet on the ground and knowing that is a big deal. And in many of the places where I know you work and where I work, financial institutions played a significant role, maybe not as much as we'd like them to, but certainly among the large financial institutions played a significant role in philanthropy. So we have a shift in relationships, a shift in institutions, and like good relationship managers, we are going to have to spend a lot of time rethinking, re-understanding the infrastructure of philanthropy and civic capacity in our places and bringing people in that are not in yet and just arrived off the plane from wherever to, figure out what they're going to do.